This video is for Theme Control and Sensing, Unit Scratch It, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to use a piece of software called Scratch. What Scratch allows us to do is it allows us to create computer games. In this video tutorial I'm just going to start off with the basics, and I'm going to show you how to make this little character here move by controlling it using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Now before we do that, I want you to think back to the video that you watched previously about how computer games are created. If you remember, computer games are created by writing lines and lines of code that we call a program. And the person that creates those lines and lines of code is called a programmer. Now what this software allows us to do is, instead of having to remember all those lines of code and remember all the specific words that we have to write, what this software does is it gives us these particular lines of code here in this block, and we can simply drag these lines of code into here to create a script. So it's just like writing the code, however we're not actually having to write it, it's already written for us, and we simply just drag these lines of code, join them together to create the program to allow us to interact with this game. So it's a really nice piece of software, and it's a very simple step towards learning how to program a computer game. So let's get started. First of all, what I need to do is I need to introduce you to this interface. So I need to introduce you to what these panels are here. Now when you open Scratch, your screen will probably look like this, and this panel down here on the left hand side with these blue pieces of code, and if I click on these buttons, orange pieces of code, purple pieces of code, green pieces of code, etc. We call this panel the blocks palette. And like I said, this blocks palette holds lots of lines of code that we can drag into our script. And that's right, you've guessed it. This middle panel here is actually called our scripts area. So this is where we will actually put the lines of code that will run. This screen here is called our stage, and this is where we interact with the game. This is what the end user will see. Like for example, in the previous video you saw the FIFA 2012 game being played. That was played on the stage, but in the background you saw the program being run, and that is what you'll see in our scripts palette here. This panel here down at the bottom right, this is called our sprites list, and this is going to be very important as it will contain all the elements that are included in our game. As I've mentioned, what we're going to do is we're going to start by simply creating a very simple script that will allow us to control this cat here using the arrow keys on our keyboard. Now you can see that if I move my arrow over this cat, currently I can just click and move this cat around the screen. Now that's okay, but what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to control the cat. I want to be able to control the cat by giving instructions to say, when I click on an arrow key on my keyboard, move the cat in a certain direction. It's always a good idea to put into words what it is you want to do before you start building the script. So I'll repeat what I want to do. I want to use the arrow keys on my keyboard to make this cat move. If I break that down even further, what I actually want to do is I want to press the right arrow key on my keyboard to make the cat move to the right. When I finish that, I want to be able to press the left arrow on my keyboard to make the cat move left. And then I'm going to make the up arrow move the cat up, and the down arrow move the cat down. So I've put it into English there of what it is I want to do. And now what I've got to do is figure out what blocks of code I can use here to put into my script to make that work. Now, when you're using this software, the best advice I can give is to play around with this software and figure out what you can and can't do. What are all of these controls? What are all of these looks? What are all of these operators? Now we won't cover them all in this unit, but the best way to figure out what they do is to have a play with them and figure out for yourself what effect it has on your game. Now I'm going to start you off with, like I said, making it so that when I click on the right arrow on my keyboard, the cat moves to the right. And to do that, I'm going to start by using the control palette. So these orange blocks that you see here are blocks that I can drag into my script to make something happen. Now what I want to do is, you can see this second block here says when space key pressed. Now I know that this is the control that I need to use, so I'm going to click on that control, drag it into my script, and then let go of my mouse, like that. So I've placed that control, or that instruction, into my scripts palette. Now what I said to you is that I want to be able to press the right arrow button on my keyboard and make the cat move, and this says when the space key is pressed. So I need to change this. So if I click on the arrow, I don't want it when the space key is pressed, I want it when the right arrow is pressed. There. Now at the minute my script says when right arrow key pressed, and then that's it. I haven't told it what to do when I press the right arrow key. So now what I want to do is I want to select this motion block palette here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look down these motions and decide, right, which one is best to use. Now there's a couple that I could use, but the one I'm going to choose is this move 10 steps. I'm going to click on it and drag it across onto my scripts here. Now what I want to do is when the right arrow key is pressed, move 10 steps. Now if I want to join these two instructions together, I need to make sure that I click and link them up like that. Now when the right arrow key is pressed, move 10 steps. So if I press my right arrow button on my keyboard, you can see that when I press that right arrow button, he moves forward 10 steps. Okay, nice and simple. That's the first set of instructions that you have written to control your game. So that is the first program that you have written to control this cat. When the right arrow key is pressed, move 10 steps. Now what I want to do is I want to press the left arrow key and move it left. So how can we do that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the control, and I'm going to use the same instruction again, which is when space key pressed. I'm going to drag that into my scripts and change it so that it says when the left arrow key is pressed. I'm then going to go to my motion, and I'm actually going to use the same command, which is move 10 steps. However, this time what I want to do is I want to click inside where it says the number 10, and I want to change it. I want to change it so that it says -10. So I'm going to select the 10 and delete it by pressing the backspace key on my keyboard. And then I'm going to put the minus symbol and then the number 10. So this one here is saying move it to the right 10 steps. This one is saying move it to the left 10 steps because I've got a minus. A minus subtracts 10 steps. So let's see if that's working. When I press my right arrow, you can see that the cat moves to the right. When I press my left arrow, you can see that the cat moves to the left because it moves minus 10 steps, which means it moves backwards. So now I've written two instructions. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that you can guess what control I need to use next to move the cat up. Again, that's right, I go to control, when space key pressed. I need to change that to say when up arrow key pressed. And then I need to go to motion. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because there's not actually any move to move the cat up. But what I need you to think about is, at this point, I need you to think about a graph. Now when you have a graph, you have a y-axis and an x-axis. The y-axis is the graph going from top to bottom and bottom to top. An x-axis is where the line is going from the left to the right and the right to the left. So the y-axis is going from top to bottom. Now we can use that information to put that into our script because you can see here that what I've got is I've got a change y by 10. So I can drag this, put it onto this command that says when up arrow key pressed, change y by 10. So that'll change the y position of this cat by 10. If I press my up arrow, you'll see it working. See? So I can now move left because of this instruction. Oh, sorry, because of this instruction. And I can move right because of this instruction. And I can move up because of this instruction. Now all I need to do is I need to move the cat down when I press the down arrow. So again, I go to my control. When, drag this command onto my scripts. When down arrow, key pressed, motion, because I want the cat to move, change Y, because I still want it to move up and down. And remember, the up and down is the Y axis. So change Y by, what do you think I've got to change it by? That's right, I've got to change it by -10. So I'm going to click inside the 10, delete that by using the backspace key on my keyboard, and I'm going to put -10. Okay, now I'm going to see if that works. Here's my cat. I'm just going to move him into the middle by clicking on him. Now I'm going to press the left arrow on my keyboard, and he moves backwards because of this instruction. Right arrow on my keyboard, and he moves to the right because of this instruction. Up arrow on my keyboard, and he moves up because of this instruction. And then the down arrow on my keyboard, and he moves down because of this instruction. What I've just done there is I've just built my first program using the Scratch programming language. And all I've done is I've simply made it so that I can move the cat to the left, to the right, up and down by using the keys on my keyboard. Now the last thing I want to show you before we finish this video is how to save your work, because we don't want to do all of that fantastic programming and then lose it and not be able to open it up in the next lesson. So we go to File at the top, we click on Save As, and the Save Project dialog window appears. Now this window is slightly different to most windows that you see when you press Save. And what you'll notice is that down the left hand side here, this is where we can access where we want to save our work. Now if you're struggling because you log in as a different person, or you might log in as a whole class on one computer, it might just be safe to click on your desktop button and just save this work to your desktop. However, if you're logging onto a server, so if you have your own username and password, then what would appear here on this second button is your username. So I would click on that button and save my work there. It's a more sensible place to save it, because that way it's saving it on your account, and you can open it up on any computer that you're working on, as long as you log in as you. So I'm just going to click on Mark. The project author, you can fill this in if you like, so I could put my name, and I could put some information about the project, so I could put my first game. And then the really important part is the new file name. What do you actually want to call this? So I'm going to call this My Scratch Game, and then press OK. You'll know that it's worked if you have a look at the top here, and you'll see that the text has changed to My Scratch Game. Now if I were to close this, so I'm just going to show you this for an example. If I were to close Scratch, like that, and then I want to open Scratch up again, so I go to my Start window, and I type in Scratch, and I'm just going to open up a new version of Scratch, like this. To open my work that I did in the previous lesson, I would just go to File, Open, and then click on one of the buttons on the left hand side. So if you saved it on your desktop, click here. I didn't save it on my desktop, I saved it in the Mark. So click there, and you can see My Scratch Game appears. Press OK, and you can open up your work again. Okay,